Hello, and welcome to another week of the LA Times College Football Roundtable. I'm Ryan Kartje, LA Times USC beat writer, joined as always by Ben Bolch, our UCLA beat writer, who's on the road in Lincoln, Nebraska. What do you think of Nebraska, Ben?
As I just told you before we started, great place to get in and out of, very friendly people, but it also does kind of have a stuck in the 1960s vibe to it, which can be kind of, nice in a way. Nothing against the 1960s, but so some places kind of in need of an update. But I enjoyed my time there, and I look forward to going back during basketball season. Some of the friendliest people you'll ever encounter, so huge plus there.
Well, Ben emerges and UCLA emerges from Pleasantville with a victory over Nebraska. USC not so lucky in Seattle. Fortunately, I love Seattle, so I was at least able to salvage it in that regard. But USC literally playing the same game it has all season, slightly different this time in the sense that it made a comeback on Washington, took the lead late, and then gave it away. But Ben, let's start on a positive note. Let's start with UCLA this week. Goes into Nebraska, comes away with a victory. Suddenly feels like the Bruins have a little momentum. Maybe Deshaun Foster has righted the ship. Is that how it feels to you?
With a caveat, they did go on the roads. They have definitely looked much better these last few weeks. They look like a very well organized and well-run team, with the exception of some penalties that maybe we'll get to in here in a little bit. But yeah, I got to give them a lot of credit. As I wrote in my kind of follow story, they've really stuck with it. Even the run game, which had been awful, finally crossed 100 yards for the first time this season. Ethan Garbers, man, he last two games he's thrown for, I believe, six touchdowns, no interceptions, and before that it was nine interceptions, four touchdowns. So he has really reversed the fortunes on his season, and the team has followed suit. The defense is playing very well. Carson Swessinger today has gone from walk on to a semifinalist for the Buckus Award. One of the best stories of the college football season. So the team deserves a lot of credit for sticking in there. Now, here's the thing, I don't think Rutgers and Nebraska are world beaters by any stretch of the imagination. Now, they were both wins on the road, which is impressive, and they look good in winning those games. But I think we'll get a great test this Friday. Homecoming against Iowa and Caleb Johnson, who has just run pretty much over every defense he's gone up against. So if UCLA can beat Iowa, I think we can say fairly and safely that Deshaun Foster is on his way to a successful first season.
It's wild to me that we've reached this point where, the tables have turned with Deshaun Foster. What started so poorly is now sort of looking like it's stabilized. Meanwhile, at USC, what seemed to start really well with a win over LSU, a team that's gone on to keep winning since then, has really just gone in the tank these last few weeks. Four losses in 5 weeks, the only win coming over Rutgers. This one was especially heartbreaking in the sense that, USC once again was right on the doorstep of winning this game. Fourth and goal at the 1 yard line. Lincoln Riley finally starts giving the ball to Woody Marks, who he'd ignored for a lot of the first half. They run the ball 11 times on that drive, just looking strong. 4th and 1, and suddenly the line collapses. Woody Marks is stopped in the backfield. USC gets one more chance. They drive down the whole field. They're, within striking distance. And, the offensive line breaks down again, and Miller Moss is taken down as he's throwing. So many chances again for USC to put a team away, and they just can't do it. And I know we've harped on Lincoln Riley a lot. I certainly have this season for some of his coaching, and I think again this was just kind of another instance in which it didn't have to get to that point. I mentioned the run game. USC throws the ball 50 times again in this game. Lincoln Riley said himself that he didn't want to throw it that many times in a game, and yet he's done it 3 times in the last 6 games, 7 games, I believe. And that's just not what you want with an offense led by Miller Moss. Maybe that would have worked with Caleb Williams, although Caleb Williams never threw for 50 passes in a single game under Lincoln Riley. So the offense just feels out of sorts right now. The defense just doesn't have enough. So many guys injured, not a lot of depth to begin with. So I don't really hang any of this on Danton Lynn. But once again, we're questioning what Lincoln Riley is doing. And Lincoln Riley is responding by saying, we're just a couple plays away. That same narrative all season from the coach, I know is really worn thin with USC fans. And at this point they're staring down the barrel of not going to a bowl game. I know you mentioned, going up against Nebraska. USC has a much needed bye this week before the Nebraska game. I do think that's going to give them a shot, but then they have to win at least one of the games between UCLA and Notre Dame to just be bowl eligible, and I'm not sure they can do it at this point. I mean, especially with UCLA moving in the direction that it is right now.
Yeah, I mean, if I had to pick, if somebody said SC and UCLA are going to play this afternoon at the Rose Bowl, I would pick UCLA, and I would feel pretty confident in that pick just based on the trajectory and the fact that Lincoln Riley seems to be making the least out of what he has with that team. You talk about not running the ball. You've got a very capable run game that needs to be utilized more heavily and earlier in games, and he's not doing it. And then afterward, he's basically making the same excuses game after game. So what do they say about the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results? Well, we're seeing it at SC because that's exactly what's happening.
There's not a ton of changes that you can make just personnel wise. I know the one that fans have really focused in on, and I wrote about this morning in our Times of Troy newsletter, is the potentially changing quarterbacks. But and it's tough because on one hand, Miller Moss, you know what you're getting out of him. I think Lincoln Riley has proven that he trusts him with his offense. I think he can put him in much better situations to succeed as well. But on the other hand, with 3 games left in a pretty meaningless season at this point, what's the hurt in trying Jaden Mayava, a more mobile option at quarterback? I think the hurt in not trying him at this point is you may find him in the transfer portal after this season. I know if he, sees how this season is going and sees Lincoln Riley stick with Miller Moss, who has another year of eligibility ahead, why would you assume that you're going to just win the job next season? So I would think eventually he's going to enter the portal if he doesn't get a chance here in the next couple games. So a lot to weigh even just for the future for Lincoln Riley in this one.
Yeah, and flipping to Deshaun Foster for a second here. Ethan Garbers is obviously going to be out of eligibility for this year, but man, what a story he's kind of been, as I alluded to, his upward trajectory. If he can lead them to a bowl game in his final stretch here, he'll be remembered, I think, very fondly, even though they would be looking at something like the Las Vegas Bowl, best case scenario, which obviously is not what you want. But I do think that with 4 games left, they need to go 3-1. Iowa at home, on the road at Washington, USC at the Rose Bowl, and then Fresno State at the Rose Bowl. So I give them, maybe a 60% chance of winning 3 out of those 4 games. If you look at each one individually, not really all that super imposing or daunting of a task. So a lot at stake here, and it's interesting to think that if both of these teams finish 6-6, it would be considered a huge success for UCLA and a huge failure for SC.
Certainly, and at this point, I wonder. You mentioned just changes that Deshaun Foster made, and just sort of sticking with his approach in spite of a lot of criticism. What have you seen out of him in terms of the way he's managed these last couple weeks?
He was kind of adopting a bolder approach in his in-game decision-making with 4th downs and things like that. This week, he kind of went back to a little slightly more conservative approach, but it paid off, and then they have won these last 2 games. But I just feel like watching the team, they just seem more organized, better coached. I think their cohesiveness is really coming together. Now, I will say the one thing that kind of cost them, could have cost them last week was 3 unsportsmanlike conduct penalties. Each one led to a touchdown on a Nebraska drive, and you just can't have that, especially if you're playing a team it's a notch above Nebraska. That's going to cost you a loss. A week before against Rutgers, it was three consecutive penalties on DBs late in the game as Rutgers was rallying. So these are the kinds of things that, you can brush under the rug a little bit in a win, but as you play slightly better teams like Iowa, if that kind of stuff crops up again, it could cost you a game. So Deshaun said after the game, he said, once we clean these things up, we'll really take off. And I think there is some credence in that. And I will add, it was interesting. One of the most interesting things said post game was, I asked about this late season surge and some momentum, and unprompted, he said, Martin hired the right guy. And it was a little bit of a non sequitur because I didn't ask about that. But, I think his reason for saying that was, he's been feeling the heat. They started 1-5. People were saying this guy's a disaster. And now, they have won a couple of games, and, they were going up against Tony White in Nebraska, the defensive coordinator for the Cornhuskers. And I feel that, that was a little bit of a, saying the unspoken that, hey, I just beat the guy that some people thought should have gotten this job instead of me. So, things are trending up for Coach Foster, but like I said, they've got to win this Iowa game on Friday.
Yeah, things definitely trending down for Lincoln Riley at this point. But I do think there is one change. I mentioned the potential of making a change at quarterback, but the one most obvious change, the easiest thing that he can do, though I'm not sure he will, is just to run the ball more. I mean, Woody Marks had there were only 8 runs in the first half against Washington, which is just not acceptable, especially going up against the number one pass defense in America in the rain. I just don't know why anyone would game plan in that way. But naturally things changed in the second half. Riley seemed to understand that by then, and Woody Marks ends up with 22 carries for 126 yards. Now, granted, he wasn't able to finish that last one. Not that that was his fault, but very much a self-reflection week ahead for Lincoln Riley and USC. But he's just so stubbornly stuck to his guns. Last season, this season, I don't really see any reason why we would think that anything would be different coming out of this bye. Granted, Nebraska awaiting, like you said, definitely a flawed team, a game that USC desperately needs, or else I don't think this team is going to make it to bowl eligibility. But on the bright side, for both schools, basketball season starts today. So at least there's that to look forward to.
Yes, I'm very excited. And interestingly enough, on Friday, basketball and football, UCLA football and basketball both play on the same day. And which do you think I picked to go to?
I think we can all guess.
Yes, I will be with Mick Cronin and the basketball team. They're playing New Mexico in Las Vegas. Now, UCLA football beats Iowa and looks impressive in doing so. I might have missed, the bigger story of the day. But yes, I'm a basketball guy. I was born in North Carolina. I will always pick basketball over football, so I'm going to do it here.
And I will pick my wife over football this weekend, USC on a bye, and no one is happier than her that now she has help with the 1-year-old. So wish me luck on that weekend. And we will catch you all next week to recap UCLA, Iowa. Thanks, Ben.
Thank you.